Hi there, this is Elaine Benfield, and welcome to another episode of Her Stories. Today is going to be a hard one, and I want to prepare any audience member. We're going to be talking about suicide. This, unfortunately, is something that I've had to deal with in the last, 10 days. And I have a wonderful guest that's going to talk and kind of help me and us process kind of the situation of my world and our world. This is honoring a good friend whose name is Margaret, who took her life about 10 days ago. I'm actually, anyone that knows me, I really tried not to read, but this one I feel that I have to because I'm going to break into tears. So, a profound loss and powerful reminder shape today's episodes. As we reflect on the life of a dear friend, we pause not only to celebrate her radiant spirit, but also to honor the significant impact she had on everyone that knew her. At her memorial last Sunday, Tim Dawson delivered a eulogy that touched every heart in the room. His words were even more heartfelt because they were a call to action, a reminder to cherish every moment, to hold our loved ones closer, to recognize that behind every smile, someone may be fighting a battle we cannot see. Tim's tribute highlighted the harsh reality that mental health struggles, addiction, and depression don't discriminate. They affect people from every background and every community, yet far too often, these struggles remain hidden, cloaked in silence and shame. This episode of Her Stories is reflection. It's a tribute and it's a promise for us to do better, speak up, and reach out because no one should have to fight this alone. If you've ever felt that you're not enough and you've ever wondered if the world would be better without you in it, please know you matter. Your story matters and there's help, there's hope. You are not alone. And there are people like Tim, like my dear friend, and a community of people who care deeply and are willing to help at any moment. We want our friend's memory to be a light in dark places and reminder that love, compassion, and support are our greatest strengths. So, Tim, welcome to Her Stories, and thank you beyond from my heart for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, why don't we step back and can you tell the audience who you are and, the connection with Margaret, but really focusing on you and your journey of where you are today?
Sure. So my name is Tim Dawson. I'm born and raised here in Atlanta, Georgia. I met Margaret in the mid 90s. We went to high school together. I was a senior in high school when she was a freshman, and we had a lot of good years and good times together. We were never romantically involved, if some wondered about that. We were always just genuine friends. I had friends that dated her. I had girlfriends that were her, closest friends and things like that. And so we have memories of homecoming together and just all the high school stuff. I was one of those jocks. I played sports and I loved to hang around with guys like that, but I had a lot of friends that weren't also. And that's kind of how Margaret was as well. She was captain of the cheerleaders and, Miss Central, and just she loved everyone. And that's the memory that I have of her. She went through college and all of those things. And like many of us, you kind of became separated by life. I went on and I got married and had kids, and she got married and had kids and doing the thing. And we kept up on social media. There was never a harsh word ever said between the two of us, but we didn't talk a whole lot other than Facebook posts or pictures, and even that, she wasn't as active on there for a number of years. So I really had no idea of the struggles and the things like that that she was facing, not even really her divorce, until recent. She reached out to me in May because I've been very transparent on social media about my battles with alcohol. And most recently, last year, as it came up to my 3-year anniversary of being sober, I was battling with psychosis caused by sleeplessness, depression, feeling like the world was caving in on me. And so like I was in complete isolation in the dark hole of what depression and psychosis felt like and feels like. So by sharing that experience and her reading that, it drew out the things that she was struggling with. So in May of this year, she reached out, just told me a little bit about what she was going through and her struggles, and just started asking me questions. And so we started talking every day. And, you know, one of the principles, or one, when the recovery program that I'm in, is that the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And she wanted to stop, and she shared the struggles, and so it's literally like a month of conversations, and so by all means, I'm no expert to all the things that she's went through, but we connected in a way that was not just superficial. It
Mm.
was real, and
And she was
just
honest with you and, like, open.
as honest as she possibly could be, because I believe now some of the things that I've learned, that she was still in the battle with the alcohol. That's just a lonely feeling. But I introduced her to some other women, namely Colleen, who is a really, really close person in my life that was 8 years sober, and they started talking because I felt like she needed another woman in the program that she could talk to and relate to on that level as well.
And I wanted to, not to interject because I think, part of the challenge is, and I think you saw we met in person, we didn't know. There's a core group of us that were close as you could be for 20 years, and she hid 90% of this. There wasn't a thing we didn't talk about except this. She was, and I'm going to say this, she was perfect. We all felt she was perfect. And I want to bring that up so clearly that she had so much hidden in her life, but she wanted us to view her as this, Miss Georgia Peach and the captain of cheerleader team. Like, she was flawless in so many ways. And that's why this came to a shock to my mom's group, because all of us are like, I'm sorry, who did you just say? And we were shocked. And it took us a moment to go, wait a second. Even though we shared these, I knew so much that I will go to my grave that she shared with me. She didn't share this. And I wanted to bring that up to you, that's the fact that she talked to you and was willing to be vulnerable, because, there are people that knew, I know there were rumors, but we didn't drink together for a long time. So it's this, she drank in secret or she drank at home and we didn't. So I wanted to get your take on you going through troubles and, you know, how do you see kind of this? Is that something also that you hid a piece of your life and helped kind of talk through? Because that's part of my trying to cope going, had she not tell me and had she not tell us?
So again, the only thing that I can speak on is from my experience, and so my drinking, I started as most people do. I was a freshman in high school and hanging out with older people because of playing sports and everything. I was introduced to drinking around that time. So anybody that knew me growing up, if we were having fun, alcohol was a part of that, and it was very social. It was very like party oriented, and that continued through, early adulthood, the college years definitely. And then things kind of changed in my early 20s. I started to experiment with other things as well. And I hit a rock bottom there. I toyed with recovery for a little bit of time, but I didn't stick. And, it was 20 years of continuing to drink like that, very social, very public. If you were hanging around with me and we were at a concert, if we were at a ball game or whatever, tailgating as well, I would be that guy. I would get over the top, whatever, and we would laugh it off and things like that. The only thing that I can say is like the last 2 or 3 years before I like really got into recovery, things kind of changed. And I felt like alcohol turned on me. It became less fun,
Yeah.
and so while I would still be willing to go out and have a beer or a drink or whatever socially, and sometimes, tailgating or concerts or whatever, still be that guy. But I drank in secret as well. When COVID happened, like I had liquor bottles in my truck, and I was still able to go into the office. There were a lot of times I was drinking on the way home, or I was stopping in the pool parking lot and finishing a bottle just to get home and act like I was sober. There were times, I share this with other men that I help, and one of the rock bottom moments for me was literally sitting with my three daughters watching Disney movies or whatever, and like going out into the garage and finishing a bottle of cinnamon whiskey or honey whiskey or whatever. Like I didn't want it, like I needed it. And then there were mornings on the way to work where I would literally sit there and wrestle with whether or not to finish the bottle off or throw it away. And those were very private moments that I kept inside. And to the outside looking in, everything looked great because my numbers were great at work.
Yeah.
I was that guy that life of the party, funny, whatever, fill in the blank. Margaret was all those things that you were saying, and what she told me, just to let you, under the hood, was that she didn't allow people to see her get drunk. She was
I never
very
saw it. 20 years of more, and I said in the eulogy I gave, we started ladies' night where it was like we were faithful, but I also we were very careful, but I never ever I went on vacation with her, never saw her ever out of control. And that's something I think I really want to stress with the audience is you can, as you said, you were functioning. You were no one would have known, as you said, and that's something I really want to get across that you don't know everyone. You don't deep down, people let you see to some degree what they want you to see. And she never let on. Never. I mean, it was shocking to me being like, "What?" And that's where I feel like from your perspective, you were capable and thriving in many ways, just not always, you know?
it's a very difficult thing. One of the things that I read at the end of my talk Sunday was that, the importance of rigorous honesty. So, like for me, that meant going to my owners of my company and other people that I was hiding the
Mhm.
truth about how bad my drinking was. Like I had to get honest about that because as I continued to lie to myself, when they saw signs and they would reach out and ask me, you hear the words like, "No, no, no, I'm good, I'm fine, I have it all under control." I'm there were signs, right? But I was lying to myself, so by an extension of that, I continued to lie to everyone around me. So as I recovered and as I became more and more honest, there was layers of accountability, just letting people in. That's a pride thing, that's an ego thing. What are people gonna think if they really know me, And Margaret was very, very concerned about what people might think if they found out what was really going on. So she was I don't know why she chose me. I feel like that was. I still wonder that. I still ask that. I have conversations with people that are mutual friends and Sunday was extremely tough to get up there and to stand up there and talk.
But you were so powerful that I do wanna stress, I told you before we started, and I text you this, that my 2 of my 3 kids were there, and both of them said, I said, "I have to talk about this because I'm shattered, and I just your words were so," and I wanna say, like, you delivered such a powerful eulogy. You captured who she was, but also captured you aren't alone, and I think you said, like, the dark thoughts, and I'd love you to elaborate on that because I think you can unless you're going through it, it's hard for me to comprehend. You have thoughts that are telling you you're not good enough. You just can't what and I'd love you to talk a little bit about that because that resonated so much that I hearing it from your words were the whole you everyone something about those lines were triggered all of us going, it made sense when you said it. So I'd love you to get into kind of that.
It's extremely hard to understand, mental health as such. For me personally, before I went through that, I was just like, "Come on, man up, toughen up, whatever, quit using it as a crutch," you know, what have you. And then, I was tops in my field. I was making a ton of money, and all of a sudden, I can't sleep. I can't eat. I feel like the world is caving in on me. And the thoughts that I were having as the psychosis started to really, really take hold, and the thoughts that I've never had before and walked through, like sudden loss of my father or the alcoholism, like active addiction, all that stuff I'd never had. Suicidal thoughts where I was like, the world would be better off without me, feeling like everyone that I've ever wronged, it was like somehow I deserved what I was going through. Somehow everybody would be happy if I was just not a part of their lives, including my family, my mother, my sister. people that love me through anything and everything. My daughters, like I didn't trust anyone. It was a very, very dark place. As I've gone through therapy and talked about this with my therapist over the past 12 months, you know, our part of the brain that helps us communicate and problem solve and like filter out all of these things, mine wasn't working. Mine was asleep because I wasn't being able to take deep breaths, and like the anxiety and the fear and the depression was just too much. And so I couldn't problem solve and think of a good way to do it. I didn't have access to a gun. I didn't think that sleeping pills would work. And I was sharing this morning. It was like one of my biggest fears was me attempting to take my life and it not working, and then ending up locked up in a nut house. So the only thing that I can talk about is just how dark and evil those thoughts are.
And
Here I
hopeless.
am. It's the exact opposite of what God and hope and like forgiveness and love and peace and all of those things. It's the exact opposite, and it's coming in our own voice. We're hearing it in our own words. It's not somebody else saying it.
Mm.
It's like we're telling it to ourselves.
And
Um,
constant. My understanding is it's constant over and over again. And I'll give the example of our dear friend. She was always running. She was helping her kids and she was the best mom. She always had noise. She was always traveling. She was always, and my understanding is trying to unpack this and understand this better for me and to help her children is the minute she sat still, that those noises when she wasn't busy, all of a sudden that creeped in. And I'm sure she had it throughout the day. And I'll never know 100%. I don't want to speak for her. But in the end, when you're alone and silent and everything's calm in the world, that must be so deafening in your mind because you're hearing those noises and voices saying you weren't good enough today, you weren't perfect, you weren't the best mother, and your kids are better off with your ex-husband. And I can't imagine, but that's it's keeping. So I want to reiterate, like, if you're running in circles, and I know this is targeted more to women, but this is so much to men as well. When you have that silence, sometimes that's when you really do need to reach out and say, God, I'm having a hard time today. Or however, and I know it's impossible. How did you get to the turning point where you realized you needed the help? Like, how did you take that? Because I know we talked about October, like the fall was beyond tough for you. How did
so
you know you needed, like, what was, I don't want to say tipping point, but how'd you know you just finally were like, oh my God, I have to get the help I need?
well, I was not functioning. It got to the point where I was like the nightmares and the fears and all of that were paralyzing. But excuse me. When it got to the point where I couldn't go to work, my daughters were scared to death. It had gone on for a few months. I had gone to the doctor and I had gotten checked out. And early in January of 24, they had diagnosed me with seasonal depression and prescribed me with an antidepressant and another sleeping aid or what have you. But being in recovery, I wouldn't take it. My ego and pride wouldn't allow me to do that. So I continued to spiral. I continued to stay sleepless. I was able to work for a few more months, but by April, I wasn't in work and I just wasn't myself. And it got to the point where my wife and kids were, threatening to leave for a weekend. And I was so afraid of everything. I couldn't be alone to the point where my, wife couldn't even go shopping on her own or what have you. If I had to go and pick up the girls, I wanted somebody to ride with me. I was just completely afraid of being alone. And by extension, like there were times where they were afraid to leave me alone. Had to have my mom come and stay with me, and at this point, I was almost a mute. I'd lost the ability to communicate. So, what you were just talking about, like talking and like sharing what you're feeling, I had been pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down, and then I lost the ability to communicate. So, by June of 24, they had convinced me to start, 25 milligrams of an antidepressant, and then I agreed to go to counseling. And I started counseling June 5th, and it was very difficult when you can't talk, and the way that you get better is to talk. It was very, very tough. But the therapist that I have, and I still see him today, just had me try to describe the moments that I was feeling fearful. So describe what that looked like and describe what that felt like. And he wouldn't let me skim over things. if I got emotional or if I got afraid or what have you, he just kept pulling it out of me, pulling it out of me. And by like 6 weeks of therapy, we had a breakthrough, because as I shared the things that were going on, part of psychosis is like we're void of reality. There is no, you can't differentiate between what is true, what is false, what is make believe. Whatever it is that's in my mind was my reality. That is where I was stuck. And he pulled it through. And then he's like, I'm going to pull out my phone and I want you to as well. I'm not texting, I'm not emailing. We're going to do this together. And he had me Google sleep deprived psychosis. And we did that. And he goes, I want you to read this stuff. And so as I read it, it was me to the T. It was, all the things that we're talking about, like the darkness of thoughts,
Do you feel relieved when you finally were able to share?
oh, I broke down and started crying because there was finally like some type of answer to what was going on.
Do you feel like release where you're like, "Oh my god, the weight on my shoulders, like, I just can't imagine how you felt, like, my god."
It was like I had just come up from the bottom of the ocean and I started to be able to breathe again. And that's like literal and metaphorically because my anxiety and fear was at such a level that it was very, very tough for me to like take that deep breath that some of us sometimes we have to take just to reset and get centered again. And you can feel it kind of, you
Just
know,
and I think it's
I couldn't do that. Like it was like there was a block there, so it was getting answers like that was, I'll never forget the day, um, and I haven't really shut up since.
but that's why your voice and my platform are gonna make a difference. We just are because there's no shame in any of this. I think I'm so thankful to have you in my life and having your journey. I mean, and I wanted to talk about, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, you're not as well, but my family's hit. My mother was bipolar, my youngest son is now bipolar, diagnosed as being bipolar, my ex-husband. I and very often for many years, no offense, the pediatrician kept telling my son, "Oh, you're just depressed. Here, try this med and try this." And I don't want to tell and get into his story, but it was until he had a breaking point going, I need help. That because the medicine, yes, it can help you, but as you said clearly, like until you were getting the counseling and the therapy, it is it's all intersection of, yeah, medicine can help you, but if first of all, there's so many wrong meds. Some meds make you psychotic I give you psychosis. And I think I don't, I, if you need it, I'm so supportive, but you also have to be very careful and have the right doctor that knows what they're doing with the therapy piece and make sure. Because I'm sure you had, as you said, you didn't want to take anything in January, 2024. But then look, when you find there is a combination that can make you feel better and it works. And I'm sure, did it take a while to find kind of that right combination for you with medicine? Like, how was that?
So
And
the
willing to
first,
take it.
I say that again. What was the last
And
question?
willing to take it, because that's
It
sometimes
was it was big. It had a lot to do with my family. It had a lot to do with circumstance, and it had a lot to do with the last doctor that I saw. So by the end of March, I believe, I'm getting worse. The night terrors were worse, and it got to the point where I wasn't sleeping at all. And I went back and I told the doctor, I was honest with what was going on, that I had been prescribed something, but I wasn't willing to take it. And I had tried the sleep aid a couple of times, but much like melatonin or Tylenol PM or any of those things, when I took it, like it would help me fall asleep, but only for like minutes. And once I woke up, I felt even worse and I'd be up all night. And then it was like,
then a horrible
it,
next day. It's
a
your journey.
horrible, horrible feeling afterwards. So the fact that a relative of mine was on Zoloft and that she prescribed it to pregnant women and that she told me it was non-narcotic and that it helped, I listened and I just started taking it, and even I don't know, 11 or 12 days in, like I missed a day or what have you. And one of the thing about these antidepressants, most of the time it takes weeks or so to get in your bloodstream.
It's like, what is it, 3 weeks to 4 weeks to kick in? And
It
you can't
depends on
also
your body chemistry and everything like that, right? Everybody's different. For me, my daughter said that they could tell a difference almost instantly just because.
and you can't just go off it either. Because I know people
No,
the biggest challenge, and I've seen this in my family and friends, is they think, "Oh, I'm doing really well, I don't need the meds." But then they go off it cold turkey, which is super damaging,
it's
and
dangerous.
it's dangerous, and it's the I really want to reiterate, like, doctors give you meds, make sure it's the right one, but also don't think you're okay, because then you've got the whole bottom out of, and I've seen that way too many times in my life. I do wanna talk about, like, you know, grief and addiction are both isolating in their own ways. What have you learned about connection, vulnerability, the power of showing up for each other? Because to me, you're such the epitome of this, of bringing this all together. But how, they're isolating, but how did you learn with this connection and sharing your story? How has that helped you and to reiterate to others that, it's so important to be honest, but also, reach out?
So after psychosis, okay, and just to reiterate, like when this happened, I was 2.5 years sober. This was no alcohol, no drugs, complete sobriety. I wasn't taking anything. And so go through that, right? That's 7 months of like complete darkness and all of that stuff. As I started to come out of that, after the breakthrough happened, I started to take inventory, like what was going on? What happened that allowed that to happen? Well, I was still going to some of my group therapy, but I stopped sharing. I was still talking with my sponsor, but I wasn't being completely honest. I was holding, I had a lot of secrets, a lot of things internalized, and that I was like, oh my gosh, I hope that they don't really find out, a lot of guilt and shame and remorse. And so as I took that inventory of that, I just started doing the opposite. The therapist was like, you have to continue to talk and you have to continue to share and you have to get honest. And I had the opportunity to do that. With the idea of wanting to help other men and other people not go through that trap of, I'm not going to share today because what am I going to bring to this conversation? Well, so I started to share again and I started to talk about what I was going through. And I started to have other men like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that you shared that. I haven't been sleeping well. My mind has been this or that." And so a lot of times what happens when we share our vulnerable moments, somebody else is going through the very same thing that we're going through, and that's the power of group therapy.
Yeah,
Um,
and I, for me, as we talked about, like, someone's listening and they're quietly struggling and they have addiction or depression, what would you want them to hear? Like, what's that message that to make a difference of, as you said, share and be vulnerable? Like, what is it that, someone who's really struggling and can't just be honest with themselves and the world? What advice would you give them?
Start with somebody that loves you the most and tell them the truth. Whatever the struggle is, whatever the addiction is, whatever the thought is, start with someone that loves you the most. Understand that there are, whether it's rehab facilities and all of that, that is great. But at the end of the day, like you have to learn how to live real life. And a lot of times when people get out of rehab, they think that they're cured and they don't get into another way of realizing like they have to change the way that they live, right? So for me it was group therapy. It was becoming vulnerable and sharing, okay, this is why I'm here. This is who I am and what's been going on and this is why I'm here, and just allowing me to be honest for the first time about those struggles so that there were other people that had gone down through those things that were on the other side of
Yeah.
it. And so a lot of those times, like what Margaret was dealing with, what I was dealing with, what a lot of people deal with in depression and addiction, well, connection is the exact opposite of that. So when you when you're connected, I mean, I have a network now of people that both reach out to me and that I reach out to as well. And sometimes I'm lifting them up and sometimes they're grabbing me and lifting me up, which is what the past, week or so has been like. And it's amazing. I can't imagine going through things like this without having that network of people, but it's scary. Can I trust them? Can I share this? What are people going to think if I am honest with this? Because I am the president and CEO, or I am the top salesperson, or I am fill in the blank, whatever it is. I'm, Miss House Mom that has it all together, and everybody looks to me for leadership and guidance and planning and all the fun things, right? What are they going to think if they find out I'm drinking 2 bottles of wine at night just to live? Whatever that looks like.
So, and I think it's so, we sat in a full room last Sunday together, and every single and part of my eulogy was every one of us would have helped. There wasn't a person in that room that wouldn't have sacrificed everything. I live 10 minutes away from her, from Margaret, and I'm like, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you text me? But she couldn't. And I've come to terms with the whole room would have saved her or tried to save her, but she couldn't save herself in that moment. And I think it's so important that your life means something, each and every one of us, and to be vulnerable. And no one's going to shame you and think you said it so beautifully that, you know, it doesn't, no one's going to judge you. And knowing that you have that, one person, and now we have it within this moms group that we met. Now we have a joint text, which we always had, but now it's back to like, just want to say I love you. Everyone all right? Everyone okay? And just no walls, no barriers. And there's been a few of us that have said, "Oh my God, today was horrible." And we're like, "Okay, let's get on the phone, let's talk, let's text." And that's part of the pleasure of having this, being vulnerable is having the group of people that can help you. And you're doing that for the people in your world. Because I'll always regret that, why didn't she call me? Or why didn't she text me? Or any of us? And I want to reiterate, like, whoever it is that you're comfortable with, because I understand, I can imagine the shame and not being perfect and not, but find that one person that you think, and Tim, you were that for Margaret. She knew she could count on you and she knew that there was no judgment. And that's such an important, you helped her as much as you could. And I think, the depression and mental challenges was just too overwhelming, unfortunately, just from my humble opinion.
Yeah, it's to be able to sit and to listen to somebody that is struggling. My perspective on that stuff, because of my own experiences and all, have changed a lot over the past 4 plus years. And I guess the other thing that I would add is, like, even if someone did judge, even if there are people that look through the human eyes, right? The human condition. Unfortunately, we live in a judgmental thing. And you know what? So what? Right? Like, look at it as a life and death thing, that you are worth it, and that whether your immediate friendship base can identify or, understand the problem, there are other people that can. Like, a lot of times when we're in the struggles, we think that we're so unique to what we're struggling with. We think that the problems we're going through are like, oh my God, no one would understand. And when I got into recovery and I started sharing things that I was so embarrassed about, oh my gosh, there were so many other men that had struggled in the exact same way. And now there are people that are coming along into my life as well that are just coming out of that struggle, and they hear my share and they hear about Margaret's story and they hear about, getting up and delivering a eulogy about stuff like this or whatever, and it's helping other people. So maybe my direct friendship base didn't understand. A lot of them still don't, but we're still friends and we still love each other. But getting into that group therapy has saved my life, because you find commonality with people that have been there before.
And it just should be, we always talk about if you break your leg, you break your arm, whatever, you could go to the hospital and get help. And I've unfortunately had to deal with it in so many aspects of my life that it is not easy to get mental help. we do not insurance doesn't pay for it. It's super expensive. They don't sometimes pay for counseling. I don't want to discredit that our healthcare system does not help the mental health challenges. But there are groups, there are free organizations, you fight your insurance company as I have in the past recently. And I'm like, this is the best care for someone, and it's, finding the right group. And if you don't like the group you're in, there's other groups. Like you've
Thousands.
thousands, and there's thousands, and that's what I learned really over the last year of, ugh, if this one isn't working and you don't feel like you want to share, find another group. Like, you have to click with the people you're with. And I've learned that from my youngest son of finding your people, because it's that connection to be vulnerable and to tell your story. And I really want anyone that's like, oh, I've tried therapy and it just doesn't work for me. I've heard that so many times. I'm like, then find another therapist or find another group. I know I'm simplifying it, but there are other groups. There's other people that can help.
So, yeah, I just want to touch on that real quick because there are people that come in and out of the same rooms that I'm in, the same recovery. They read the same literature that I do, and they're like, "Oh, it just doesn't work for me." And I'm like, "Well, have you worked the steps? Do you have a sponsor? Have you tried to build a network? Are you trying to connect with other men and find commonality? Or are you more focused on the things that make you different?" And, unfortunately, not everyone is ready to recover,
Yeah.
you know? So,
And it's a lifelong battle. Like, every day, as I'll be very transparent. Every day I will fight weight. And I've been, working for years on, I'm 45 pounds down. But to me, that's my daily battle. And I've been so transparent about it. And every day, someone with mental challenges, with mental struggles, with addiction, with every day it's a battle. Every day you're waking up and it isn't easy. But every day it can get better, and I think you're such a great testament to it. Your voice and helping others is going to make a difference. And I it just, I'm so thankful, because if there's more people like you and me trying to get this out, there is no shame. It's the Facebook look versus Facebook reality, or Instagram. It's people hide. Everyone has something, no matter what you see from the outside. And if this does not, I everyone has something. And I think it's so important that no one's perfect. Everyone has some shit in their life, or something. And I think it's so important for that, and I think you're a great testament to it.
thank you.
So what's I guess a couple last, and I want to be conscious of your time. One last question before I ask my final question. How do people find help? What is your recommendation for talking to your doctor? What way would you say, okay, I'm really struggling. I now know I need to get help. What would you recommend as a next step for someone?
So if you're struggling with alcohol or drugs, for me, again, I can only speak from what has helped me. I've been very active in the group therapy scene, very active within the AA community. So AA has worked for me, but there's other organizations that provide that as well. Celebrate Recovery is one. For a while, I was taking meetings into Sunrise Detox, where people are trying to detox and things like that. So if you're drinking all the time and if you want to stop, then that is a good place to start. Stopping the alcohol abuse suddenly can be scary, one thing, emotionally, but also physically, it can be a health hazard as well. So things like that are ways to get started. For me, I was, I had gotten arrested in 2019 for a stupid public intoxication. Of course, I wouldn't stop drinking at the time, but when I was ready to stop, I called her back and I finally got honest. And I was like, talked to a counselor, and I was like, back in 2019, I just lied to you about every question so that I could get through this and I could show the judge that I was willing to do what it took or what have you. But I didn't answer any of those questions honestly. And like my drinking's way out of hand, right? So the first step is just to get honest and just admit, you know what? Maybe it's not so much that I want to drink tonight. Maybe it's, I need this drink. If that's the truth, then say it out loud and then realize that there's places that you can go. There's all kinds of meetings and groups and all of that stuff all over. I'm
And mental health piece too that, you know, and I will put on her story in the resource page how to find these organizations and, reach out. There are hotlines, text a friend saying I'm struggling and just be honest. And, that's the first step of, as you said, being honest with yourself and just knowing you need help. No one's, I started going to therapy 3 years ago during life challenges. Best thing I ever did, and I'm a very positive, very happy person, but I've been struggling. And having that, knowing I have a touch point of someone making me accountable and someone I can be so honest with, it is such a release, as you said, of just being the weight of the world on my shoulders, having someone to talk to that isn't your child or your spouse or a parent. It is so important, or a friend, and have that person that you really relate to. I think it's critical. So, anything else you want to add? And then I'll ask you my last question. Is there anything else? Tim, you're wonderful. This is exactly, we're going to make a difference and help people realize they're not alone.
I guess the only other thing that I want to talk about is kind of how I ended things. If you're struggling with those kind of thoughts, if you got that weight of the world, everything is collapsing down, it's too overwhelming, you're afraid, you've done things that have harmed people, you've done things that have harmed family, you're just full of guilt and shame and remorse. I've been there. And I know what that feels like, to the point where it was hard to physically breathe. And you're not alone, you know? I think that if we all got honest, we would all admit that we live in a crazy time right now where if we allow it, fear can paralyze us all. And just not yell, not debate, not try to solve every world's problems, but just realize that your story and your struggles are important to people. Like, you matter, and it is okay to not be okay. Say those things out loud, whatever it is. Keeping it bottled up and pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down is so bad for our mental well-being. And then we can convince ourselves that no one cares, but they can't care if they don't know.
And they
And then we're
can't
like,
help you if
yeah, and
they
we
don't
we
know.
expect people to just know, like we think, well, can't you tell that I'm dying inside? And it's just, we have to say things out loud, and we have.
I think it's so important what you said. None of us could save Margaret because we didn't know. The majority of us didn't know how bad. I didn't know at all. And that's where it's like, I feel forever I'll regret that God, I didn't see it. And I keep doing the reel of 20 years of conversations. She didn't show me. She didn't want to. And promise me, if anyone's listening to this, don't do that. Know you're loved. Know you're not alone. Know you're not better off not being here. This is where you're meant to be. And it's going to be struggle, but know the devastation you leave, that's forever for all of us, and these four beautiful children. On that, I'm just so thankful for you. I want to ask you one closing question. What empowers you and what inspires you, Tim?
What empowers me? So I am a believer. I would describe myself as a Christian. I would have told you that I was a Christian before I got sober. I've always been active in the church. However, after recovery and after working the steps and like really coming in touch with what that meant to me, and my relationship with that has changed a lot. I start every day in prayer. I start every day acknowledging the things that I'm weak at, the character defects or things that I struggle with. I ask for God's presence in my life. I humbly ask that He helps remove those things from my life, but I admit that I continue to struggle. Man, what empowers me, I'm grateful to be sober. I'm grateful that there are people that reach out and that care. I'm walking through a very, very tough season even before this happened with Margaret. The past year and a half or so has been incredibly difficult, but I'm grateful that I can find joy because I know that somehow, some way, God is going to use all of these things for the good. That's his promise to us all. I've struggled with why a lot since this happened. Even Sunday when we were there and learning more about her struggles and learning more what the family has gone through and learning more things like that, I was sitting there like, God, how am I here today? Like, why am I here? How am I going to
You were
do this?
asked to speak, which is incredible,
Asked.
and there's
Finally,
only a few of us that were, and
yeah.
that's powerful in itself.
Uh, but yeah, I'm inspired by recovery, because I think it's a miracle. Man, I used to love to drink, and I used to have a lot of fun around it. And now I have found that I am still that same guy and I can still laugh and hang out. And it doesn't matter to me if you've got a glass of wine or a beer or a shot or anything like that in your hand. I can be present and I can be myself now. I've found who I am. And man, I'm so grateful for that.
And I'm grateful for that for you, and I'm so thankful, and you're inspiring to me, Tim, with everything you do. We met under horrible circumstances, but I think we have our voices are gonna help others. I've had a few people reach out with, recently I posted a video, and I had a woman come to me and said, "I was in complete despair and heard your voice." She goes, "I don't know how I found you, but thank you, because 'cause I'm gonna live another day because of what you said." And I
Yeah.
think you're doing the same thing, and not we're here to help. We're here, as people who, lost someone so dear to us, forever will be impacted. And you're making such a difference, Tim, with what you do. And I'm thankful you're in my world. And just, anyone listening, I know this was a little bit harder of an episode, but I will put resources on my page on her stories, and know you're not alone. Reach out. There's always someone that will be there to help you, and get the help you need, and be honest about it. And thanks again, Tim. It was a pleasure. And I really appreciate your support and honesty. And everyone stay tuned for another episode of Her Story.